guys, this is Andy with Epic Automotive. We've got a 2006 Volkswagen Jetta TDI in today, and we are going to put a front wheel bearing in it. So let's get started. So first of all, we see this wheel bearing has a lot of excessive play up and down, indication that the bearing is totally worn out, way overdue for this one, so it's time to replace it. We've got the wheel off now. These wheels are actually held on by lug nut bolts. They're not studs and nuts. This is much like a BMW. These are 17 millimeter. So just be aware when you take the wheel off, once you remove that last bolt, the wheel might tend to want to fall off of there. So just be careful when you remove that wheel. The next thing we need to do is remove our caliper assembly, remove our rotor, and remove this bolt that bolts into the drive shaft. So get those removed and we can go from there. Now when removing the brakes, you'll see a connector right here. That's a brake pad wear sensor. To disconnect that, you just need to take a screwdriver, put it in the slot here and pry up on the tab, and it will release. And now we can remove our 21 millimeter bolts that hold our caliper bracket in. We've got the caliper removed. Now we see our rotors held on by a Torx bolt. It's a T35. So remove that, and we can pull the rotor off and then access the wheel bearing. So we've got our bolt removed for our rotor, but the rotor still doesn't want to come off of there. So what you can do is take a ball peen hammer, use the round end of the hammer, place it on a flat surface of the inner portion of the rotor, the hub portion, and then you can take another hammer, a mini sledge, and tap in different places around here to release that from the hub. Like that. So now we can see the back of the wheel bearing assembly. You'll notice there are 4 bolts that hold the wheel bearing to the knuckle. There's 2 on the bottom and 2 on the top. Now, in order to access those bolts, the socket I have is kind of a longer one. It's a 12 millimeter spline socket. The drive shaft is in the way. I can't get that socket in at a good angle to get those bolts out of there. So what we need to do next is remove the ball joint from the bottom here. Remove these bolts, remove the ball joint so we can pull the knuckle away from the drive shaft so we can access those bolts. So now with the 3 nuts in the bottom of the ball joint removed, we were able to pry the control arm down, move that ball joint out, and that gave us enough room to pull the drive shaft out and set it aside so we can access the wheel bearing bolts. So now what we need to do is take our 12 millimeter spline socket, remove those 4 bolts, and pull the wheel bearing off. We're getting to our last bolt in our wheel bearing, and wanted to mention that you really don't want to use anything other than the right tool. You need to use a 12 millimeter spline socket. These bolts are very tight. If you try to get away with using an Allen wrench, no doubt you're just going to end up rounding off the heads of these bolts, and you'll have major problems at that point. So we'll demonstrate how tight these are. So we've got it loosened now, and if you had used the wrong tool, you would have rounded that off. So don't try to get away with using any other tool than the right one. We've got all 4 of our bolts removed now from our wheel bearing, so at this point we're ready to remove it from the knuckle. So we see it's still attached on there pretty good, so you can just take a hammer and tap it off of it. So we've got the wheel bearing removed. Now we can see some corrosion has developed between the bearing and the knuckle. What we want to do is clean this surface up a little bit for the new bearing to seat in there properly without any rust in there. Being careful not to damage this ABS sensor here in the corner, we can take some emery cloth and clean this up and make sure you don't damage that plastic part of that sensor right there. Now once we've got that surface clean enough, we can set our new bearing in place. And now we're ready to put everything back together. We can put our bolts back in. This kit came with new wheel bearing bolts, which is nice in case you damage the heads on the old ones. You've got new ones to install. It's a good idea to put some thread locker on those new bolts. Tighten everything down to spec, put everything back together, and you should be all set. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.